Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane and Hurricane HD video blog for the 16th of October 2012. The two items of note today will be Rafael, Hurricane Rafael out here in the Atlantic. It became a hurricane just south of 25 north latitude yesterday evening. Only the second hurricane to do so south of that latitude this year. The other seven formed north of 25 north, which runs somewhere roughly like that. And it really shows you how hostile the deep tropics have been this year. The other interesting item today is Paul, Hurricane Paul, now making landfall along the southern Baja, a change from what was forecast just a day ago. We'll look at that in detail in just a moment. First of all, looking at Rafael, it still has pretty good feeder bands extending way down into the Caribbean still, trying to feed energy into that circulation center. Bermuda is pretty easy to pick out here, right there on the satellite photograph. And the center of Rafael will go to the east of Bermuda just enough to keep the hurricane conditions away from there, I do believe. Nonetheless, right now, it's kind of squally, rainy, breezy conditions, but the worst of the weather will pass off to the east, as you can see on the forecast track map. And then Rafael will turn south of east out here in the northern Atlantic. Hopefully it won't turn south-southeast and affect the Azores, which is right there. They've already gone through enough this year. And isn't that amazing that most of the activity that's affected land has been the Azores Islands this year? Who would have thought? In the eastern Pacific, Hurricane Paul making landfall now over the Baja. Luckily, as bad as that may sound, the hurricane force winds only extend out to 30 miles from the center, and the tropical storm force winds only 115 miles. That means it's confined to a fairly small area overall, and most locations will not see hurricane conditions. Just a rather windy, squally, miserable day, I guess, overall. And it's interesting because the forecast now, obviously with it coming on shore, keeps the center over the Baja solidly so for about a day. But this time yesterday, this was the forecast. The center was not forecast to make landfall along the Baja. In fact, the cone of uncertainty extended only to about right there. And if we go back to the other forecast map graphic, it's interesting to see that it looks like Paul will go outside just a little bit that cone of uncertainty from yesterday afternoon. See that? So that shows you that you really have to pay attention to these systems and not take for granted that the forecast is going to be pinpoint perfect, especially when you're dealing with hurricanes that can cause so much damage. So hopefully people in the region were watching this and were prepared. And luckily Paul was weakening, and a weakening tropical cyclone is quite a bit different than one that is intensifying. Nonetheless, something to kind of take to heart, especially when we're considering future Atlantic hurricanes down the road, which we may have to deal with before all is said and done. The ECMWF MJO forecast here still showing a very favorable pattern as it comes into phase 1 and 2, and history has shown us that when you get the MJO into that region, you start to really look for development in the western hemisphere. And I think that with these very warm sea surface temperatures that we have in the western Atlantic, Caribbean Sea especially, that we will see something develop. In fact, the departures from normal, quite a bit above normal through the Caribbean, the Northwest Atlantic as well. And interesting, too, to contrast that with the eastern and central Pacific, where water temperatures have come down in recent weeks, contrary to the notion that we thought that there would be an El Nino. We're not even close to it, and the Atlantic basin continues to warm. So in response to this favorable MJO pulse, the GFS model in a week from now showing low pressure starting to develop overall in the western Caribbean and southeast Pacific. And if we go to day 8, you can see that gets a little bit more defined, even have a little bit of a curvature to the precipitation pattern down here. This monsoon trough that's down here, the focusing mechanism for development, going to become quite a bit active. And by day 9 and 10, we should see, if all goes to what the models are indicating, and I think all the indications are, that we will see a tropical cyclone, a depression or a storm or a hurricane. I don't know which. We'll have to just wait and see. But I think everything is pointing to the direction that something down here in the Western Caribbean will form before the next 2 weeks is out. And that makes sense climatologically speaking, and the favorable MJO pulse coming through. I don't think it'll be any surprise to anyone, and we'll watch that on a daily basis to start nailing down some of the details as we get closer to that time frame. So there you have it. That's a look at the tropics for today. Again, I'm Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. Always a privilege to produce these videos for you on Hurricane and Hurricane HD. I'll be back to do that again for you tomorrow.